ban trophy hunting. Thank you very much. Good night. No, that's not it. That's not it. We're going to do more. Thank you very much for joining me again, my friends. I hope you've all had a beautiful day. It's such a beautiful day here in London. Wherever you are in the world, I hope you're having as gorgeous a day as we are here. It's hot, sunny, and beautiful. And of course, there's very little traffic on the road, and there's very few planes in the sky. And it's wonderful. So I do hope you're all staying happy and healthy and safe and enjoying the breath of fresh air that the planet seems to be getting. And while there is that positive to all of this, obviously the downside of it is that some of the wonderful organizations that we know and love, the animal charities, the rescues, the sanctuaries, they're all under increasing pressure and probably facing the most challenging time that they've ever been through, simply because of the impact that the pandemic is having across the globe. So people are furloughed, people are losing their jobs, people are obviously tightening the purse strings, and that's perfectly understandable. But with that, obviously there's going to be an enormous struggle ahead and great challenges for all of those animal charities that do so much for the animals that we have to support to get them through this. And I've created this series in order to bring them together to you, to introduce you to some of these incredible people, these wildlife heroes, and the organizations that they represent, and essentially give us all inspiration and calls to action, things we can do to help through this crazy time. Because clearly it's not going to be as easy for people, broadly speaking, to dip into their pockets and make donations, and we understand that. So that's one of the key things behind this, is to give a platform to the wonderful organizations that I know, and some that I'm meeting through this for the first time, and I want to introduce it to you, because they all deserve a voice and a platform, and the work they do is exemplary and heroic. And so, as you've seen before with any of the broadcasts, if you've watched them, we strive to empower you, to inspire you, and to bring you those individuals who can achieve that and help us stay together, stay proactive, and get through this crazy time. So tonight, my guest is an incredible wildlife hero, someone who for whom conservation and compassion I think literally courses through her veins. And as is always the case with someone as profoundly wonderful as this, it's difficult to introduce them. But I know her well enough to know that one of the key elements to her is humility, and that what she wants to talk about tonight is the foundation that she runs and represents this evening. And so I want to start a little bit differently tonight. I'm going to play you a video, and then I'm going to introduce you to our guest. So here comes the video, and it will also play sound, and I would urge you to crank your volume up, because this is very powerful video, and I hope you enjoy it. So stand by.
Our planet is dying, and humans are the disease driving its destruction. Over 1 million species currently face extinction, with many losing that battle daily. We have the solution at our fingertips if we simply choose to act. We have the healing power to restore fragile balance, but only if we add our voice, our support, and our commitment to a brighter future.
When David Shepherd was born in 1931, over 3 million elephants roamed the African continent. In his lifetime, 90% have been slaughtered, and still, today, an elephant is killed every 20 minutes for its tusks. We promise to never stop fighting until every single elephant is able to roam freely in the wild, safe from poaching and the Ivory Trade.
In less than a decade, humans have killed almost 9,000 of the first last remaining African rhinos, one of the oldest living species on this planet. Today, fewer than 23,000 remain across the entire continent. We commit to standing shoulder to shoulder in support of brave men and women who risk their lives to halt the extinction of the rhino.
In only 100 years, 3 tiger subspecies have gone extinct. 93% of traditional tiger homeland have been lost, and 96% of wild tigers have been wiped out. More tigers now live in captivity in the United States alone than in the wild. We will never stop in our mission to ban the trade in tiger parts and to protect tigers in the wild.
"300 pangolins are taken from the wild every single day, making them the most trafficked animal in the world and one of the planet's most at-risk species. We will never give up working to change the hearts and minds of people who consume pangolin parts and other endangered wildlife products across the world."
The list of species now at threat is sadly endless. Fewer than 20,000 lions remain in Africa. Every 4 hours, a chimp is brutally stolen from the wild. As few as 4,000 snow leopards remain, and the African painted dog is now one of the most critically endangered mammals in Africa. In the last 10 years, over 1,000 rangers, brave men and women on the front line of conservation, have died in the line of duty. They desperately need our help to fight and win the war on wildlife crime.
Help us save these species from vanishing forever. Through dedication, hard work, and the support of people like you, David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation has influenced policy, shifted attitudes, and provided an unwavering voice for wildlife conservation from grassroots to the world stage for the last 35 years. But there is so much more to do, and the situation has never been more urgent. We will only stop when the killing ends.
So, my friends, the CEO of the David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation, my friend, the wonderful Georgina, affectionately known as Peanut Lamb, who's on mute.
It's always a good start, isn't it? I thought I could the button back. So, hi, Dan, and everybody who's joining. Thank you so much for having us on this evening.
Oh, thank you. My God, that video always brings tears to my eyes. It's so powerful, and it's such an incredible endorsement and an indication of the unbelievable, invaluable work that your organization does.
Thank you. It is a stark reminder of some of the challenges we're facing, but also some of the opportunities that we have at the moment, and to celebrate why we are all listening or tuning in, or why we all care so much about the natural world and the future health of our planet. So,
and what an incredible example of just exactly as I described you before. You've for me, you are the living embodiment of someone who lives and breathes compassion and conservation, and it's your life. I mean, it literally is your entire life, isn't it? Literally.
Yeah. I mean, I see it as such a privilege. Obviously, the David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation was established by my grandfather over 35 years ago. So I've grown up living and breathing it. And then my mother, who is now the chair of our trustees, she ran it as the CEO for 25 years, whilst I was obviously at school and growing up and doing a job, outside the conservation world before I got into this. So it's definitely been a part of our family, and it's been part of our history. I feel incredibly lucky, the fact that, you know, we used to grow up spending our summer holidays whilst mum was working, visiting project sites in Africa, bundling around in the back of a Land Rover, you know, seeing those on the ground conservationists who are, you know, true heroes of what we're, you know, supporting. So it's definitely part of our DNA, and every member of our family is engaged or involved in some shape or form, whether it's my sister Emily, who is a wildlife painter, or, you know, our cousins who are such great advocates, and my auntie who's a wildlife painter. So it's definitely part of our DNA, and I see it as a huge privilege to be able to carry on the legacy that Grandad started so many years ago.
And it's a huge privilege to have you here to talk to us tonight, and thank you so much again for doing that. And what I also found really powerful and important in that video is the message that you're involved in so much. I mean, there's so many species that we were looking at there, and I think that, you know, it's so important for people to understand the breadth of the, as you said, the challenges we face, and perhaps never more challenging than it is right now. But tell us about some of the lesser known projects, lesser known species, lesser known areas that you guys operate in.
Yeah, I think, you know, Grandad was so well known for his iconic jumbos, as he so loved them. So a lot of people make the assumption or the association that we focus primarily on elephants, but we do have 8 core species that we work to protect and support in their natural habitat. And that ranges from snow leopards in Kyrgyzstan and Mongolia, which don't get as much coverage, but are just as endangered and in need of support, to some of the tiger populations across Asia. So whether that's in India or whether it's the Indo-Chinese tiger in Thailand or Russia. And we're also working with, for example, chimps in Guinea and Africa. So our portfolio stretches across Africa and Asia, but we focus on 8 core species. We do occasionally fund rapid response projects that look at other species, but it's primarily within those species or within the countries that we're already operating in. We also do fund, which is a lot of our work and the primary kind of core of what we do, undercover investigations that look into the illegal wildlife trade and wildlife crime, which is so important when we're looking at species conservation. You know, our view is you have to be working in so many different environments without spreading yourself too thin, and making sure you're working with trusted partners on the ground. But it's not just enough nowadays, sadly, to just be operating on the ground. So, for example, funding anti-poaching or law enforcement initiatives in Africa, in Zambia, for example, you have to now be looking at source and transit networks and demand countries who are consuming wildlife products. You have to be, or our view is that we operate in our own way at every single level of that source, transit and demand market, because wildlife crime is a huge issue, and if you're not operating at all that level, we don't really have that much hope to win. So that's our philosophy and it's our view, and we take a very holistic approach to conservation, and we have to engage. It's also a lot about the people. So whilst we talk about our core species, one of the fundamental things that we believe in is it's rangers and it's men and women on the front line. They're the ones putting their lives on the line every day in what is a fight against wildlife crime. And whether they're an anti-poaching ranger in Africa or whether they're an undercover investigator in some of the Asian markets, looking at the criminal syndicates and dismantling them, it's absolutely about people and engaging the key stakeholders, whether it's a community in Africa or it's educating end consumers of wildlife products. So it's very much a broad variety that we work with, but we are very, very targeted in our approach and who we fund and where we fund. We appreciate that we sadly can't do everything, and there are so many issues and challenges. So we do focus on those core species across Africa and Asia, and very much with long-term trusted partners. We very much believe that you have to be in conservation for the long game. Sadly, it's not enough nowadays to just parachute in, give a bit of funding and come back out. You have to be steadfast supporters in a lot of these landscapes, which take a long time to not only, recover, but first of all to stabilize. We talk a lot about species recovery, but we have to stabilize populations before they can look to recover, and that's a long-term game. So it's something that Grandad was really passionate about from when he first started it, and when my mother Melanie took over, about really investing in the people who know what they're doing and they're having a real impact on the ground. So
it's extraordinary listening to you talk about it, because that's the thing I think that is the unknown to a huge swathe of the population, even those who are engaged in the issues and care deeply. I think there's essentially a lack of understanding of the complexity of conservation. As you say, you're talking about so many different facets. You can't just say, let's stick some rangers on the ground with guns and will protect the animals, because as you quite rightly say, as long as there's demand, as long as there's people willing to spend the money, they'll find a way. And they've demonstrated that over the decades, haven't they? Do you think something I'm really fascinated to know? This is completely off piste. Right now, you hear a lot about in Africa and elsewhere, of course, but in Africa primarily, I've heard a lot about the fact that because there's less eyes on the ground, because there's no safaris operating, the poaching threat, bushmeat trade, all the threats that wildlife face anyway, ordinarily, are magnified and emphasized. Is that what you're experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, we've obviously, in light of the COVID pandemic, we've stayed in very close comms with all of our ground-based partners and reassured them that now is the time to support them more than ever before. We, as much as we are able to, obviously with funding coming in, we won't pull back any of the funding commitments that we've made, because it is so important now when they're in very vulnerable positions. And the way we're looking at it is a lot of the areas that we're working in and operating, they are surrounded by some of the most economically deprived and socially vulnerable people and communities who, when their employment has been taken away, for example, because of the tourist industry bottoming out, and that is a lot around national parks, because obviously the communities living tend to be employed by lodges or safari operators, and whilst there's no tourists, there's no employment. So it's not surprising that, you know, if you're going to feed your family and you need to survive, that you're going to go back into illegal activity or wildlife crime, be that poaching or, you know, or more sinister activity on a larger scale. So they are definitely seeing major spikes in poaching. We've had reports tragically over the last week, and you know, got to be quite careful about where we name certain populations, which again is another sensitivity around conservation. But there's been reports that we've had directly from projects as to rhinos that have been killed in areas where for the last close to 2.5 years there have been no poaching instances. You know, India, in an area that we support in the northern province of Assam, they had 13 months of no rhinos poached, and last week a rhino was poached, because there is definitely this lack of eyes on the ground. There's a huge amount of economic pressure now on a lot of these very, very, very vulnerable locations, and it is a major issue. We've also seen a result in Uganda, for example. There are major concerns over, for example, lion populations, because as communities have to go into national parks to hunt for subsistence hunting, not necessarily for the more commercial bushmeat trade, it's putting greater human-wildlife conflict in place. So of course you're getting more interactions with human and wildlife. And of course, you know, if you're trying to save your cattle or your only source of income, your first reaction is probably going to be to shoot something that's threatening you or your income stream. So we're definitely seeing a big spike, not in all locations, but it is a major concern of ours, and especially the industry, you know, the tourist and the safari industry, which is going to take so long to recover. It is going to be a while before there is that constant pressure and that blanket coverage, because even though a lot of operators in national parks, they're not, you know, law enforcement. Even just the process of having safari vehicles out and about or tourists in the area, it's a natural deterrent, because people are far more concerned about being caught or reported. So it is a big concern, and we are definitely monitoring it, and we're helping where we can. And the teams are doing the most fantastic job with skeleton crews. The advantage, obviously, with it working in a national park is social distancing is much easier to overcome, because it's a natural habit. So they're not having to isolate on the same scale, for example, as if you're in a big city. So it's not affecting the actual operations and the way they go about it. It's just the amount of resource and teams that they are able to deploy when budgets, you know, are really tight at the moment.
So it raises the question, and it's a toughie. I think you're seeing it on the bottom of the screen right there. Ariana's asking, what can people do? I mean, it's such a tough question. What can people do especially while we can't be there, while even just as you've described, you know, going on safari, even though it may not be that someone's going, it may be a photographic safari is the aim, but being there physically in person, contributing to the economy, being eyes on the ground, vehicles in the game reserves, that in itself is a deterrent to some extent. In the current circumstances, what can people do? Have you got any kind of calls to action at the moment? Petitions and stuff?
You know, the really obvious one is to fund organisations, and whether it's £10, £20, or as much as people are able to, it really, really does make a difference at the moment. So it is funding organizations who are still operating and who are trusted partners, but a lot of people aren't necessarily in that position, which, we fully appreciate and understand. So there is a huge amount that you can do, whether it's listening to these type of conversations or debates. So we're getting as up to speed as we can, and we're educating and we're raising awareness for a lot of the issues. That's really important. The more people that know about these issues, then the greater social mobilization we can put into force to make major change. So, for example, there's a lot going on at the moment around changing legislation in China, as an example, to end the illegal wildlife trade and to close down and have tougher regulations on, we need to be careful between the distinction between wet markets and legal wildlife trade. But the more public pressure that we can put on influencers and celebrities and MPs, for example, around saying enough is enough, we need to end the illegal wildlife trade, which is the root cause of all the poaching issues. There's a huge amount of opportunity at the moment, ironically, despite the challenges that the world is facing, where the world's eyes have never been more focused on the environment and the health of ecosystems and the important role that ecosystems play and the wildlife that live, and call that home. So there's a vast array of opportunity, and a lot of that is around policy change. A lot of it is around education or looking towards the consumer markets and saying enough is enough. No longer can we utilize our natural resources as we have been doing. It's unsustainable, and it will see the extinction of species. So there's a lot in terms of education, raising awareness, sharing these platforms, getting involved, following as many organizations and charities who are doing some fantastic work on the ground, and also more at the international level, where we have a slightly captive audience, sorry to kind of use the awful phrase, where people have time and capacity at the moment more than they have done before. Even if you're working full time, we have the evenings and the weekends where we can't go out. So trying to jump on board and learn as much as possible is a really powerful tool, because it means that when we are suddenly able to open up some of these industries, we'll be so much more aware, even if it's ethical tourism, about where we should travel, how our engagement with the natural world should be. There's a lot that we can be doing now to learn beyond just financial support, but it does come back to that is the thing at the moment that are keeping these rangers operational. It is literally the money that's coming into some of these ground-based projects, and where people can help, or whether it's raising community funds or jumping on board with a virtual, the money that people are saving, from not going down to the pub to have a catch up with friends, those type of things can be, invested in small ways. So it's very much around that, but definitely the awareness and the education piece is hugely important at the moment as well.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things that it's a lot of work, and it's, as you say, it's quite complex. There's lots of work required to sometimes make small steps in the right, and sometimes we get real quick wins, but our aim is, as much as anything else, to give hope and empowerment in the sense that we can and do achieve wins. And you just shared one with me just before we went live, which I was so thrilled about. And we very nearly met at that particular event. But why don't you share what you shared with me? Because I think it's wonderful.
Absolutely. And I think it's such a good point, Dan. Conservation can be a pretty depressing environment and sector to work in, but it is also one of the most inspiring and incredible sectors to be engaged in. Every single story that you hear is hopeful, and there's always a solution. It's really important to kind of remember that, despite the shocking statistics we hear. But yesterday was a fantastic day. I don't know, for those who don't know, there is an international ban on ivory trade. There isn't, however, domestic bans across the world. So individual countries can still sell elephant ivory. And a number of countries have legislation in place. So China was actually, ironically, one of the first countries to put stronger domestic legislation in place. The US were, and the UK started a process through a really, 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 really engaged public consultation a few years ago. It's dragged on a while around coming up with a UK Ivory Act, and that was passed, and it had cross-parliamentary support, and it was a really fantastic time. And we were hugely supportive of the government steps. There are still a few loopholes that we need to tighten and work on, but it was great. What then happened was a very small group of ivory antique traders and dealers got together, and they tried to appeal the Ivory Act on the basis that it was a breach of their human rights, and also that it wasn't in line with EU regulations. Obviously, that's a slightly different post-Brexit, which we won't get onto, is a slightly different thing now. So they brought a case, and wanted to appeal and overturn the new UK Ivory Act. The first time it came to court in the UK, it was rejected and dismissed. And then they brought a second case to the Court of Appeal. And that was end of, I'm forgetting my dates, I'm losing what
I think it was end of Jan.
It was earlier this year, and where the hearing was heard. And we heard news yesterday, finally, which is absolutely fantastic, that the appeal was dismissed, which is great. So there's still, a few kind of legal caveats around that can finally take one stage higher, but we're hoping it won't. It's been dismissed twice now. It is a very small group of people who are trying to overturn the act, and it would be disastrous, and it would be a real shame. The overwhelming public support for tighter domestic measures on ivory was overwhelming during the public consultation. So it would go against what the British public wanted, and it will be one of the strongest acts enacted across the globe, and it will mean that the UK is showing real leadership in tightening domestic legislation around trades like the illegal ivory trade, which will ultimately have an incredibly positive impact on elephant populations and recovery in Africa.
What wonderful news! Thank you for sharing it. I think you were possibly going to be there and weren't able to make it at the last minute, and I was there, and with Dom Dyer, who a lot of you will know, speaking at that event, and just really kind of pulling our hair out at the fact that we even still had to be having that conversation, because as you quite rightly said, it was years ago. I remember I was outside Parliament broadcasting live on Facebook, ironically, when the initial, you guys will remember, the initial petition with 100,000 plus signatures sparked the debate in Parliament, as it does, and the debate took place. And I remember I was so hopeful. All of us were hopeful. It was about a 3-hour debate, which in itself is wonderful. And there were cross-party MPs supporting the ban. Yeah. And at the last minute, the DEFRA representative said, "No, we're good. We're pretty cool with where it is. We're not going to change anything for now." And it just literally ripped the carpet out from underneath everything we were doing and hoping for. And fast forward, I think it's got to be 5 years, 4 or 5 years at least. And yesterday, as you say, there's more to do, but the appeal was dismissed. And that's the antiques lobby, isn't it, that's been trying to make that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really important to recognize, we work a lot in the policy arena, especially around elephants. And it's a lot of the public would assume, because there's an international ban and you can't trade ivory internationally, a lot of people assume that therefore there isn't a market, or it's either illegal or it's not. Well, that's not the case. And for example, the EU and Japan are the two largest ivory markets in the world now, and the EU is dragging their heels in terms of implementing strong domestic measures. And there are a lot of there's a UN body, for example, that regulates international trade, but it is up to individual nation states to implement tougher laws. And it's something we've been campaigning for a very long time. The fact that all domestic ivory markets need to be closed. It should be a non-negotiable. And
absolutely.
So to finally see yesterday that the UK Ivory Act, which we've been campaigning for so long, alongside some incredible other UK-based NGOs, and it's been a really, really, really collaborative approach, which has been incredible.
Yeah.
Finally see that come to fruition is great. And it's a first step, and it means that we can now put greater pressure on, for example, the EU to look at their own laws. And it does start a roll-on effect. The fact that China, who was one of the biggest ivory markets in the world, closed their ivory markets before the UK and the EU. We're all very quick to jump to blaming, certain countries for certain species or for the consumptive use. But, we had our own trade, and the EU is now one of the largest ivory markets in the world. And that's something that we need to address and we need to remember. So it is really important that it's not only just international trade when we're talking about this, it's very much about the domestic trade as well.
Yeah. Absolutely, it's a very, very important point and very valid, and that's a great example of it, as you quite rightly say. It's a bitter pill to swallow, especially now, but we're way behind China on this one in terms of ivory, which is bizarre but true. They banned it entirely a long way ahead of us. So thankfully, there we are. We've got some that's really wonderful positive news, and the reason I wanted you to share that is because it underlines the point that we can and are making a difference together. All of that. This was as you say, you've been working, lobbying for legislative change and various other things for many, many years. And there's people out on the street marching, and there's other NGOs working for the same end goal, and all of us together have achieved this win. And we have to, I think it's so important that we recognize and celebrate those wins in conservation, because like you said, it can be a dark and lonely place at times.
Yeah. And 100%, I totally agree with that, Dan. And we get asked a lot as an organization, as a charity, where they say, a lot of funders sometimes get frustrated because they say, well, we're still seeing these staggering statistics of an elephant every 20 minutes is killed, or 300 pangolins are still being trafficked. Where is all this money that we're giving and you guys are granting? And what is the point of it if we are still seeing the extinction of species? And what we turn around and say, and it's really hard to quantify, but if conservation organizations hadn't been in operation for, say, the 35 years that we have, we wouldn't be talking about the extinction of elephants. They would be an extinct species. So it is really hard to justify. So when people do get frustrated with the fact that there is, there's less wins than there are, negative news, and that, the world sadly likes to consume negative news rather than happy news. But we do have significant wins. And if we weren't all doing what we're doing, we weren't supporting these incredible people on the ground, and, this collaborative approach to real transformative and fundamental change to the way that we view our relationship with the natural world, we would be talking about tigers would be extinct, rhinos would be extinct, elephants would be extinct. So whilst there are frustrations, we have to remind ourselves that we are absolutely at the front line. And yes, there's a huge amount of pressure, but we are at the moment holding the wall, and there are still species in these wild, pristine, incredible habitats. Well, yes, they are under pressure, but they are still in existence, and they are still viable populations. So recovery is absolutely possible.
Absolutely. So all of you guys will notice that, and this isn't rehearsed, that all the cool kids have got a rhino photo on the wall behind them. And as you will remember, I mentioned in the last broadcast that somebody very kindly offered to buy the rhino photo behind me over there.
Oh, wonderful.
Which is absolutely wonderful. And I thought that gave me the idea that it would be lovely to, I'm absolutely not prepared to take any money for it, but I am prepared to take money for charity for it. So what happened with that one is that it will go to one of the four, the person who's very kindly buying it is going to choose one of the four charities, including you guys, who or maybe split it evenly between them, who deal with rhino. And with that in mind, we came up with this idea, which I'm gonna share something with you right now, and then I want to ask you to talk about your Instagram lives that you're doing as well. I'd love to hear about that. And by the way, guys, you see at the bottom of the screen, you can follow David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation on Twitter and Instagram. And Instagram, right there at DSWF Wildlife, is where you're doing regular live broadcasts yourself right now, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've started, with lockdown, we wanted to stay connected with our supporters and bring them some really interesting content. So we've started doing a live chat every Thursday. So last week, for example, we had an environmental journalist called Adam Cruz on. The week before, we had a China wildlife policy specialist called Aaron from the Environmental Investigations Agency. And it's really wonderful to see, like here today, with the amount of people that are engaging and commenting, it's really, really fantastic. And it's such a great opportunity to do that. So yeah, we do it every Thursday at 5 p.m. on our channel.
There you go. Thursdays at 5. We're not in competition with each other.
No, absolutely.
You're more of a daytime show. We although we're an evening show, we don't swear though. So the elephant's up on screen. This is a photograph that I took in Kenya. And just like before, and this is really important that you guys understand, this isn't a fundraiser and it's never going to turn into a fundraiser, but just like before, if anyone's willing to cover the costs of a print and the postage, which is, I think it's £21 or something around the £20 mark, anything else you're willing to pay for that photo, or a couple of others I will share with you, will go, every penny of it will go to the David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation. So I'll print it out in 30 by 20, so the same size as that. It looks a little smaller than it is because I'm a long way from it. That's it's a nice big size print, and I'll share a couple more with you as we go. But while I do, given that photography is, I suppose, a form of art, the David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation exists on the very foundation of art. Tell us about that and the importance of it to your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were established by David Shepherd, my grandfather, who was one of the pioneers of wildlife art in his day. And he was so frustrated with his lack of ability to be able to help and implement real change, that he felt he owed a debt to the wildlife who was his success and who graced his canvases, that he set up the foundation in order to be able to divert funds to where he felt they were best used. And a lot of that, and still today, a lot of our funding comes from wildlife art. Not only is it an incredible tool to be able to raise vital funds, but it is an absolute wonderful platform. We always say that, you know, the creative arts are the most incredible way of connecting people to that emotive feeling as to why we're doing it. Granddad was one of the most passionate people you could have ever come across. You couldn't sit in a room with him and not fall in love with the elephants that he was describing. And his paintings or wildlife art and other wildlife art can absolutely transform and capture that essence of why we're all doing this. You know, it's why we wake up every day and we go out and we work hard to support the projects on the ground in Africa and Asia. It's because we feel this deep sense of responsibility and need to fight and protect endangered species. And wildlife art can instantly transport you to those places if you're not able to go yourself. And especially in, you know, at the moment with lockdown, for example, we found, you know, a lot of our wildlife art that we're doing through social media and engaging people, it's been such a wonderful, inspiring way. You know, we were saying earlier that it's quite difficult sometimes when you are bombarded with negative news, and wildlife art is the total opposite. It is the way of making people just feel alive and happy through wildlife. And if you can raise funds through that, then absolutely fantastic. So it is our DNA. It's who we are, and it was why we were set up. And it's something that absolutely remains at the forefront of all of our fundraising initiatives, and, you know, working and recognizing that the role of artists and the creative platforms in the role that they play in conservation and help storytelling for the natural world. And
your sister Emily that you mentioned at the very beginning, who I'm very, very, very happy to tell you is also going to be a guest on this in the future, in the not too distant future. She's a great example of what you're describing in terms of art contributing to conservation. I mean, her work is staggering, beautiful work, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I know she's my sister, but I'm probably her biggest fan. And Emily not only is a wildlife artist, but she's a conservationist activist first. So she uses her wildlife art as a way of communicating a lot of the messages that, you know, not everyone wants to read a 5-page policy document, for example, around the ivory trade or elephants, but Emily can tell the story in one glimpse on her canvases, and she's so prolific, and it's so powerful, her work, and she uses her platform to do good. You know, she did a campaign last year called Sketch for Wildlife, which every single day for an entire year, she painted a sketch that she sold 100% for wildlife, and it raised over £40,000. And I mean, Emily's sketches, to be fair, a 20-minute sketch is still a masterpiece. I mean, mine was great. And she did it because it's her way of giving back and helping, and it is one of the most powerful platforms. And her use, like, you know, that, you know, her use of color and celebrating the natural world, the community, the people. She tells the story of the people as much as the animals. You really get a sense of, you know, the piece behind it. And she's very lucky. She works, and so do we. We work with some incredible photographers, because obviously, you know, you can't just jump on a plane all the time to Africa to go and get reference and paint live, which is, you know, would be wonderful. Right. But we're all looking at our, you know, environmental footprint and, you know, the impacts of climate change and travel, for example. You know, we do need to be more conscious of that. So working with photographers who are already in these places, every painting or photograph that she uses from photographers, they're from people that she knows who have told her the story. So she'll know the story of where that fish eagle was or where that elephant was. And I think that's the most powerful thing about wildlife art, is it's so obvious in Emily's work, which is why she's been so successful. And she's so passionate about, you know, it is all about the conservation for Emily. It's not about, it is obviously the art comes, you know, pretty much up there, but the conservation and the reason why she does it comes before art in a way. Yeah,
it is absolutely her again. It's in her DNA, and it's something that your entire family lives and breathes. And actually, on that point, I have to say, I'm very, very, I feel very fortunate and blessed to have connected with you and your family over the last year or so. Gosh, it flies, doesn't it? And I have the wonderful Sue Olsen from the Olsen Animal Trust to thank for that, who, among all the other incredible things she does, for animals and conservation in general. She's an incredible networker. And actually, it was initially Emily that she connected me with, because she understood that we had a very similar mindset towards conservation. And then thankfully through Emily, I've come to know you and your whole family, and I genuinely feel privileged and blessed to know you all. I think you're incredible, and thank you for what you do. Well, it's just as I say, what you're sharing tonight as well. It's just so extraordinary. The level of understanding and the impact you guys have in the conservation world, and the way you have that impact. And people can be very, very reassured by the fact that you'll be doing so long into the future because of the understanding you have and the processes you adopt. It's amazing. Now, with art in mind, still, there's of course a very special event coming up next week, isn't there?
Yes, there is. Well, it's a bit different for us this year because obviously COVID and the global pandemic has changed the way that we are all living and operating. But every year we run an exhibition called Wildlife Artist of the Year, which was set up in 2007, so we're in our 13th year. And it is, it's been described to us as the Oscars of wildlife, which is such a nice way of describing it. And it's a global competition. So this year we've had over 1,200 entries from 53 different countries. So it really is global. And it's a competition. And normally we have the exhibition showing for a week at the Mall Galleries in London, which is a fantastic way of people coming to see the exhibition, talking to us, obviously buying the art, because 50% goes to the artists, who are fantastic and need all the support in the world because they are some of the most passionate people. And then 50% comes directly to conservation projects that we support and fund. So this year, obviously, we can't hold a physical exhibition, so we are moving everything online. So we actually go live on Thursday with the exhibition, so everyone can see all of the pieces that have been shortlisted. From the 1,200, we go through a very rigorous judging process with a fantastic panel of judges from variety of different industries, artists themselves, interiors, galleries, and we come up with a short list of, it's normally about 150, I can't remember the exact number this year, and they will be displayed in an online gallery. All pieces are still for sale, and what we are doing next Tuesday, which is the 26th at 7:30 p.m, is we are going to move our award ceremony online. So we are going to try for the first time ever to announce our overall winners. We have 7 categories, so there's a category winner for each one, and I'm obviously not going to give everything away. And we have a runner-up and an overall winner, and it's a fantastic competition, and it's free for everyone to. It's free for everyone to participate at the event next Tuesday, and we'd love as many people as possible to join online. And normally it's wonderful because obviously we have the artists in the room, so when we suddenly announce who's won the first prize, and it's a £10,000 prize that is fully sponsored by some fantastic donors of ours who are passionate about art and conservation, and so it's an incredible prize. And I remember last year I happened to be standing next to the winner, Stephen Rue, who is an amazing artist with a huge big bronze piece, and he had no idea. He's entered, I think, almost every year since we started, so he just went, oh, it's another year, and I just love him. And it was the overwhelming sense of achievement. And he said, I'm showing against some of the world's most renowned wildlife artists. I never thought I'd have a chance to win. And it is such a fantastic exhibition. And it, on one wall we'll have pangolins in pencil. On the other wall we'll have snow leopards in, hand-woven tapestry. It's so varied. And it's a huge variety. It's colourful, it's exciting, it's fun, and it genuinely helps wildlife conservation. So we'd love as many people to sign up for the event on Tuesday to announce the winners, and also go online from Thursday this week. We will be launching the online exhibition, so you can pre-look at any of the artwork, you can pre-buy, and then join us for the live ceremony on Tuesday. And that, with that in mind, so at the bottom of your screen you can see the web address. However, don't worry, because I've discovered something new with Peanut's help. Where you guys are commenting, you're going to see a comment appear right now from me into that chat, which is a link directly to the Eventbrite page where you can register. And so is that 7:30 or 7? Did you say 7:30? 7 p.m.
on Tuesday?
I'm going to say 7:30, but I might get shot by our
We're
event.
going to need to find out. We
will double check. When you click on the event link, it will take you out. In my mind, I have 7:30, but it might be that because obviously it's an online event, we're starting to gather people a little earlier. I'll have to check that, but it is next Tuesday, and obviously we'd love as many people to join us as possible. It's a wonderful celebration of who we are, why we started, and celebrating some incredible wildlife artists. You know, I always think I have the best job in the world. We have the easiest job in the world because we're working with some of the most dedicated and passionate wildlife artists, and also some of the most dedicated and passionate researchers, scientists, policy advocates who are on the ground. They're the ones who have the hard job. We have the wonderful job of coordinating all these incredible, wonderful people who are listening this evening and just, you know, herding the message as to why people need to get involved and why it's important. So it will be a lovely evening next week, and I do hope as many people who are signed up this evening to listen to us chat will be able to join us. I
dare say they will, and I can see a few questions coming in regarding entering, which of course can't happen this year. But how would people do that next year?
So we do launch the online entries. It ranges, but it's normally towards the end of the year. So in September, October, I think we were this year. We do open for next year's competition, and you have until February to submit a piece. It's an online entry of £25, and you can submit as many pieces as you like, and it goes through a 3-round judging process. So we accept as many different varieties, styles. There's really no limit. And it's not photography. It is you know, art in the more traditional sense. We have different categories. So it's not just, you know, African wildlife, for example. We have a category called Into the Blue, which very much focuses on obviously marine. And we get some fantastic, you know, Arctic paintings, to dolphins, to whales, to seals, to land. You know, we also have landscape. So that beautiful sense of icebergs crumbling. It's not just your, you know, what you'd associate with the David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation in terms of terrestrial mammals. So it really is, if you are interested in art, or even if you've never painted art before, or you've never painted wildlife or a landscape, then it would be wonderful if you guys can enter next year. And if you do follow our social platforms that Dan kindly shared earlier, then you will see news of when we will be launching the new online entry forms for this at the end of this year.
There you go. And actually, on the same subject of questions coming in, Linda, I think it was, that has asked, is David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation also on YouTube? And I know the answer is yes. And I was about to see if I could find it and tell you the address, but you may know it anyway, Peanut. I don't know.
Normally, you should just be able to type in David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation, and we will come up, and you'll see our quite iconic black and white logo, which is the square with the 3 animals. Yeah. We do have a YouTube channel. We tend to, at the moment, which again, in light of this virtual world, we'll be making the most of more in the future. But it does host a lot of our old videos. For example, the video that Dan kindly showed from earlier this year, it does host a lot of the videos. So if you want to see some of the more historic archives around footage of Grandad, for example, they are on those platforms. So
great
Dan
stuff.
So fantastic.
There you go. So that's there's the YouTube channel right there, David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation. You can't go wrong, Linda. You'll find that right there. Peanut, what's next for? I mean, you guys are doing so much. We've seen that already, and you've talked about some of that. What's the key focus for you right now? Is there anything that's kind of like taking priority because of the situation?
I think for us at the moment, you know, it is tough for charities. It is really difficult at the moment, and whilst we have been overwhelmed with the support from our donors and family of supporters and like-minded individuals, it's going to be in 6 months to a year that we are. I think all charities are going to see an economic impact as a result of COVID. So our focus at the moment is absolutely supporting the projects that we are working daily to ensure that they are as supported as possible. But there's also some amazing opportunities coming out of this at the moment. So we're one of the leading charities who focus on pangolin conservation, and you know, pangolins have been touted, and there's, you know, various reports as to yes, no, but pangolins have been touted as obviously one of the key species as the origin from the transfer from animals to humans in the wet markets in Wuhan. And pangolins are incredibly threatened. We've been very excited this year to take on a couple of new pangolin projects, which is quite unusual for us. One is in Vietnam, which is an amazing project with Saving Vietnam's Wildlife. Another one is a ground-based conservation project in Kenya, looking to understand population density and how you can make communities and law enforcement officials more aware of the issues. Because, you know, when you say 300 pangolins are being trafficked every day from the wild, you know, most conservationists have never seen a pangolin in the wild, so they're coming from somewhere, and there is a real underground criminal network behind this trade. So one thing that there's a huge opportunity and focus for at the moment, in light of COVID, is a greater focus on the need to change wildlife policy and also end the international trade in wildlife products. So pangolins is one of the most consumed product in Asia for its scales, for its meat. You know, people make fetus soup because it has supposedly curative properties, which, you know, it doesn't. The scales are made of keratin, which is the same as our finger and hair. It's the same concept with rhino horn. So there is a massive push that we're working on with a number of other organizations who are using the pandemic as a real springboard to say, this is where it started. We will have global pandemics in the future unless we stop the illegal wildlife trade and we call for an end to all the consumptive use and trade in wildlife products and parts. So there's a real opportunity for us, and a number of us and other organizations are working to really drive forward that policy change and to ensure that we can make sure that conservation has some wins out of this. There are going to be some really hard times, and what we don't want to see is conservation efforts from the last couple of decades undone overnight because of the economic impacts. We want to see that actually this has granted us an opportunity. You know, traditionally we preach to the converted, and we have a lot of people who listen to us who are passionate conservationists, and it's fantastic, and it's the, you know, it's the bread and butter of who we are and what we do. But the world's eyes are suddenly on wildlife trade and the multi-billion-dollar industry, which is illegal wildlife trade and wildlife crime. And so suddenly you've got transport industry, you've got the health organizations, you've got business leaders, you've got businessmen who are hugely influential, who are, oh, we've got Kiki.
I'm so sorry to interrupt
I
you.
don't normally get interrupted on policy, but for this, I am happy to be interrupted on.
I only dared do this. I just heard the clink of the nuts on the plate, and there she is. She's sitting at her side table having dinner.
Well, she's one of the reasons why we all care so much about, you know, wildlife and animals. So I feel very honoured that she's come to listen to our chat.
Yeah, she's there. But it's the reason I was reluctant to do that without your blessing was because you're talking about such important stuff, such crucially important stuff. It's just so weird to have a squirrel in your living room while that's being discussed. But what I think is really important is, on top of the fact that these are the things that you're involved in, is you guys give people a way in which they can help. You do so through the things like the art exhibition that you're talking about, which encourages people to get involved and to become engaged, inspired, and passionate about the animals. But also on the real granular level, you know, as and when these legislative changes that you're pushing for are up for petitions, for example, you guys will share that. And so everyone who's watching, please do follow the David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation on Twitter, Instagram. You can see that right there, DSWF Wildlife. And in Facebook, you just type in David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation, same as YouTube. And everywhere you follow them, you'll be able to see the things that they're doing and the things that you can do to contribute and help that along the way. Because I think it's just fair to say that organizations just don't come any more proactive and effective and honorable in the way you do everything that you do. It's exemplary.
You know, for us, some of the policy issues can be quite complex and difficult, but it's so important for us to be able to communicate and share with people who are interested how you can help, how you can get involved. And, you know, gone are the days of just seeing a baby elephant and thinking, well, that's conservation. You know, people are aware now. People want to know about the illegal wildlife trade and ivory. So it's always been a core part of what we do in terms of being able to distribute the core messages around wildlife crime and conservation, and do it in an educational way, not in a confrontational way. So we're working with organizations who are doing education demand reduction in China and Vietnam, because you have to be working with this collaborative approach to, there is a solution and we just need to be working towards it. And, you know, as you were saying, the social mobilization is so important. We've seen it with the pressure that the UK put on the government around the Ivory consultation was huge, and it made a massive difference in terms of pushing through legislation on the ivory trade. So social mobilization and every single voice that can be added to what we're doing and what we're calling for is so important, and it really does make a difference when sometimes you feel a little bit lost, or how can you help? Even just sharing and tweeting and following a lot of these petitions and jumping on board when you can is hugely powerful and impactful.
And I think that's so. I'm really grateful to you for sharing that as well, because I think that's something that we all need reminding of, that, myself included at times, because as soon as you're involved in animal conservation, animal welfare, any of these efforts that we're all involved in, the algorithms make absolutely certain that you're inundated with just that. So you'll spend half of your day seeing petition after petition, protecting species after species in any country all over the world. And I think it's easy to get sometimes overwhelmed by that, and not necessarily even overwhelmed, but I think there tends to be, at least it's possible that there's a sense of futility, and there's not. All of these things really do make a difference. They really do, and we've seen that with the antique lobby, the antique ivory trade, that the lobby's been unsuccessful in appealing. We really can, and as you just quite rightly said, Peanut, it's really, we're dependent on people to do that, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to add on that, it's sometimes, if you can find an organization that you like, trust, and support, it's a good way of being able to following key messages. And I think one thing that we've always done, which is what Grandad, he was never afraid to have some really difficult conversations and difficult debates, whether it was around corruption, whether it was around the consumptive use of wildlife trade, or as your t-shirt says, ban trophy hunting. There's never been a lot of organizations, and something that we feel very proud about is, whilst we do it in a very sensitive way because it's about the outcome, it is absolutely about having difficult conversations and being the voice for a lot of people who aren't necessarily in a position to say it themselves. So if you can, it's much easier to share a message from an organization who is saying something quite difficult or quite sensitive than necessarily to come up or think about how you can craft your own. So there's a huge amount that can be done just through sharing that, and actually just adding your voice to some quite difficult and very controversial issues and debates a lot of the time. But if we didn't stand up for the wildlife, and everyone believed in pro-trade and consumptive use, then we would be in a really ugly space. So.
We really would. And I know I speak on behalf of everybody, and not just everyone watching, but everybody who cares about these issues and these animals. And of course, the people, as you quite rightly said, the people that surround these issues as well, from rangers to communities to anyone else. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts, because you are the epitome of standing up for these animals, and standing up for what you believe in, and for what's right. And you do it in an incredible, powerful, effective way, and we're all so grateful, me included. So thank you, and thank you so much for spending some of your evening sharing all this with us, because I think it's so invaluable to hear directly from you guys.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure, Dan. And as I said, we have the easy job. We're just representing the view of you and everyone else who feels just as passionately. I'm just very lucky. I have my dream job. So, it really is. It's an honor, and it's a privilege and a pleasure to do what we do, and to be able to represent all of our members and supporters, because that's what we do. So, and also, our conservation partners on the ground. So, I feel very lucky to be sitting here talking to all of you guys, and just being the voice that can share some of these issues and topics. Well,
we likewise, we feel, and this is going to get gushy, but we feel very lucky that we have you as one of the great figureheads of the conservation effort, because and you personally, and what the foundation does, it's just fantastic, and I'm eternally grateful to you. Thank you. You mentioned education, and one of I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce you, just before we say goodbye, to my next guest, which will be on Thursday. So I'm now remembering what day it is, which I struggled with last time. 48 hours from now, Thursday evening at 7 p.m. I'll be joined by Lorian McLaren, who is from Action for Rhinos, who I have the great honor of being a patron for. And they, among other things, take as you've talked about tonight yourself, a very holistic approach. And they know that the education is the key. And I know Val Green, who's on here, who, by the way, a quick shout out for the One Voice for Animals UK appeal, which Val has put together, which is something else I urge you all to go to. The One Voice for Animals UK.
DSWF, the double thumbs up.
There you go. Boom. Double thumbs up.
Fantastic.
That emoji. So go check that out as well, because that's an incredible effort that Val's put together, and incredibly important. So please do check that out. And I saw a comment from Val earlier on that education is key.
Yeah.
And it absolutely is. And my guest on Thursday, Lorian from Action for Rhinos, absolutely understands that. And they really are sort of spearheading some of the efforts into the education of people around the world into the plight of rhinos and how we can help. So please tune in for that. And then on Saturday, 2 more days after that, I'll be joined at 7 p.m. by Mr. Will Travers, the president of the Born Free Foundation. And so I've got what a week. I've got the CEO of the David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation in front of us right now, and then Lorian from Action for Rhinos, and then Will from Born Free. This is like a dream come true for me. It's incredible, and thank you again so much for taking the time to talk to me, Peanut. It's just...
I have to say, I will 100% be listening into both of those. Both fantastic organisations and individuals who are doing amazing work, and who, we as an organisation and as an individual, I admire hugely. So I will definitely be tuning in. Well,
thank you. We'd love to have you. And you've just said something. I think that's just another a great point to make to end with. It's just the fact that you've epitomised your collaborative approach, that you know, in talking about those other charities and the work that they do so highly and with such respect. And that's, as you kind of closes the loop right back to what you said at the very beginning. The only way that this works, the only way we can be successful, is with this collaborative approach, a holistic collaborative approach, and you do that so well, and we're eternally grateful. So
thanks, Dan.
Thank you. My God, it's just been so wonderful to talk to you, and keep doing the amazing work you do, and check in with us. And guys, please, follow DSWF Wildlife. Don't miss on any of these wonderful things. Please sign up for that event. Don't forget, to the bottom of your screen right now, the event next Tuesday, the art award, and you will find the link, the actual link, in the comments, posted by Food for Thought documentary. So just scroll up in the comments and you'll see it somewhere in there. There's so many comments, which is lovely of you guys. Thank you for being so engaged. Thank you for watching. I hope very much to see you on Thursday. I did lose track of the day. Peanut, I adore you. Thank you so much.
Oh, likewise, Dan. Thank you so much. It's entirely mutual.
See you guys all soon. Bye.